Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to UCD. You're very welcome to the 13th ordinary meeting of the UCD Law Society, the public business of which is to debate the motion that this House supports Ireland's blasphemy laws. So, to introduce the speakers now, before we deal with the records of the House, I'd like to call on the members of the proposition. We have Mr. Fionnan, Mr. Adam Boyle and Mr. James Green, all members of the UCD Law Society Committee. And on the opposition side, we have the Chairman and Founder of Atheism Ireland, Mr. Michael Nugent. We have Professor Julien Mercille of the UCD School of Geography. And we have Mr. Barry Hickey, former Treasurer of the UCD Law Society, and we're delighted to welcome him back.
Right, so, blasphemy. I suppose I want to start by clearing a few things up. In my speech tonight, I hope to talk to you about the unique position that Ireland has and its blasphemy laws, and why that makes why I support this motion. That in the light of the massacre, that I support Ireland's blasphemy laws, because Ireland's blasphemy laws are actually quite unique, and I'm sure we'll hear it from the opposition side about how we're one of the only countries in the world. I'm not sure if we really are the only country in the world, but one of the few. Of course, the Middle East are not, but we're one of the few countries in the world to have blasphemy laws. But the way they're implemented in Ireland is pretty unique, and as a law society I'll take you through some of the intricacies of that area. But I want to start off by talking about rights and responsibilities. And I think Pope Francis put it rather well, and he got a lot of criticism for it, about the whole punching, and whether or not if his good friend standing beside him was to make an insult towards his mother, that he'd have every right to punch him, or punch his friend. And I think the whole thing got blown out of proportion, but it got coverage, and that's what the Pope was trying. He was using a point that probably wasn't brilliantly expressed, but he was using it to show how we all have rights, but we also have responsibilities within those rights. So I believe that we do in fact have a right to offend others, but I think we also have a duty to use that responsibly. Because we have to remember that in the Irish Constitution, the wording of the amendment that in the Constitution is that the publication or utterance of blasphemous sedition or indecent matter is an offence which should be punishable in accordance with law. So it does give us the flexibility and the ability to amend the law as time changes. In the 1950s, in the 1920s, Ireland was a very different place to the place it is now. So we have the ability to change the law so that it can represent our views today. And I'll be going into this later, but I think the Constitution has the ability to represent the morals of our society, what we hold to be important. And I think one of those things that we hold to be important, and one of those things that this amendment in the Constitution says, that we want to be respectful towards others. We want to respect what goes on. We're not saying, the amendment doesn't say that you can't publish material just because it goes against open debate. It goes against open debate. It's talking about indecent material. It's talking about material that has got the intention to cause offence. Yes.
Can you clarify the word indecent for the purposes of this debate?
Yep. So he's actually touched on a very important point that I'm now going to move on to, which is the law in Ireland. So it's been since 1855. We've had blasphemy laws in Ireland, and there's only been one attempted prosecution, and it was a private prosecution. And it was in the case of Conway versus independent newspapers, and it was to do with a cartoon. But in that, one of the major things was defining what blasphemy meant, defining what indecent meant. And at the time, we didn't have the legislation that we do have now, but it was saying that it was quite clear that from looking at what was printed, that no jury could reasonably conclude that such an insult existed or was intended to exist. So what we have here is the judiciary looking at the Constitution, looking at looking at it and interpreting it, and they're saying that there must be an intention. There must be an intention, and that's what I want to focus on in this. If this amendment does not prevent us from having an open debate, it just prevents people from printing with an intention to offend, printing with an intention to cause unrest. And I think that is something that we don't want anyway. We don't allow hate speech, we don't allow incitement to hatred in our society, and I don't think we should allow people to have the intention to publish that sort of material, because that's not the society that we want. I think that people should have a responsibility to use their rights in a manner that doesn't go out and incite others, and that's why this debate is quite real and quite live in France, where the issues around free speech, which is held quite dear in their hearts, to do with the foundation of the state. And I think in Ireland we have an opportunity to have with this in our constitution, we have an opportunity to direct that debate. We have an opportunity to put limits on what people are saying, not because we don't want open debate, but because we want to have the opportunity for people to be respectful in what they're saying. And I think that's important. And I think it needs to be in our constitution, because the constitution outlines what we as a society feel is important. And I think you need to make a decision whether or not you feel that having a debate that is respectful, having a debate that, yes, adheres from all opinions, but is in such a way that does not allow people to be rude or offensive or just with the point of inciting others. And I think that's why this amendment is important, and I think that's why it should be in our constitution. And for those reasons, I beg you to propose. Thank you.
Listen, this is probably the most dangerous motion that I've debated anywhere since I used to debate against IRA supporters in the 1980s and 1990s. Because the arguments for keeping our blasphemy laws are not only silly and misguided, but in the case of this particular motion are dangerous. If this motion had said, in light of the Irish Constitution's claim that all authority comes from the Holy Trinity and that the honour of public worship is due to Almighty God, that we support Ireland's blasphemy law, then it would be a silly motion. And the reason that it would be silly is because even if this universe of 100 billion galaxies was created by a conscious being, the idea that that being would need his feelings protected by the members of Dáil Éireann seems a little optimistic. One small island on one small planet in one of 100 billion galaxies. Pope Francis said recently, as we've heard, that you can't make fun of faith, which is of course just silly. Of course you can make fun of faith. Faith is believing things disproportionate to the evidence, and ridiculing faith is a good way of making people rethink believing things disproportionately to the evidence. Most traditional religious believers will, without a moment's hesitation, believe that it is ridiculous. Do you want to finish the sentence and then come back to it? We'll believe that David Icke's belief that he's God and that President George Bush is an alien space lizard is a ridiculous belief. Yeah, it's no more ridiculous than the idea that the creator of the universe impregnated a human virgin on the planet Earth in order to give birth to himself and then be tortured and die and come back to life and write a book about it. They're all equally ridiculous beliefs. But because mainstream religions consider smaller religions, cults, one set of beliefs is considered protectable. The reason that many religious beliefs need protection from ridicule is because they are ridiculous. And if they weren't ridiculous, they could withstand reasonable analysis, they wouldn't need this artificial protection. People who have non-religious, say, scientific beliefs don't worry about people laughing at the law of gravity because they know that the law of gravity isn't going to change depending on whether people laugh at it. I'll take that point now.
Yeah, so I see what you mean about ridicule religion as a means of making people not believe in religion. I don't see necessarily why it's exclusive to ridiculing it. And in the context of Irish societies today, where people who would say they have faith, and certainly a rising demographic of young people would be out-of-card Catholics at the very most, I don't see what the imperative is in achieving this. And it's not only through ridicule.
I'll put it the reverse way around, because the next point I was going to make will answer it in a different way. The other thing that the Pope said is that you can't insult other people's faith and beliefs. But if you reverse that, the Pope and indeed Islam are quite happy to be offensive and abusive to beliefs, not only beliefs that are important to others, but to actual other people who hold those beliefs. And if you take, for example, the Christian Bible says that Jews are of their fault by the devil. The Catholic Church says that homosexuality is an objective disorder. Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor has said that atheists are not fully human. The Quran says that husbands can beat their wives in certain circumstances. It says that women can inherit half of what a man can inherit, that in certain circumstances a woman's evidence is worth half of that of a man. All of those are equally offensive to me as whatever I might say about religious beliefs are offensive to religious people. And so if religious people feel that they can be insulting and abusive to other people's beliefs, then there's no reason why their beliefs should have a particularly special position.
Sir?
Yeah.
Just, if you're saying that you want to try and convert these people because their beliefs are silly, why is it that the way you want to convert them is the only thing this law stops is grossly abusive, insulting to matters held sacred, on purpose, meaning to cause offence, in a way that a reasonable person wouldn't find any genuine value in those comments being made? It's not saying that that's offensive or that's wrong or this is wrong. It's actually just kind of being a dick.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of being a dick is going into an office building and murdering people because they say something that you disagree with. And this is the context of this motion. The context of this motion is not the two things that I said earlier. It's not that we support the blasphemy law to protect God's feelings or indeed to protect individuals. And we can protect individuals through our existing laws. The Irish Attorney General has already told the Venice Commission that our incitement to hatred laws are sufficient to protect people in the way that you're talking about from incitement to hatred or harm. And the international human rights law makes a clear distinction between protecting individuals from harm and protecting their beliefs from ridicule. But what this motion says is, it says, in light of the Charlie Hebdo massacre, we support Ireland's blasphemy laws. And so that's neither silly nor misguided. In fact, it's both, but it's also dangerous. Like, it's based on the spirit of that saying from the old Wild West in America, that the final rule of poker is that a Smith & Wesson revolver beats 4 aces. And essentially what it's saying is that no matter how strong your arguments are, whether they're intellectual or whether they're based on ridicule, if you disagree, we'll shoot you. You know, and no ethical democracy can function on the basis of giving in to terrorism. That's what this motion is saying, is that in light of a terrorist act, we should give in to what the terrorists want. And don't think for a moment that maintaining blasphemy laws will protect people from these Islamic attacks, because the vast majority of people that are killed or beaten on the basis of alleged blasphemy are in Islamic countries where obviously they have blasphemy laws. If you look at Pakistan, where Asia Bibi, a Christian mother, is facing execution at the moment for blasphemy, 2 politicians who spoke out in her favour have been executed, one by his own bodyguard. In Saudi Arabia, Raf Badawi is facing 10 years in jail and 1,000 lashes for writing on a blog. After the Danish cartoons, all the attacks were in countries that had blasphemy laws. And they were organised violence. It wasn't just spontaneous. It's not credible to think that the entire Muslim population of the Middle East have an inexhaustible supply of Danish flags at home to bring out and burn. No, this is organised violence intended to change Western societies and to impose things in their own societies. And Pakistan is significant because it has said at the United Nations, it has cited the Irish blasphemy law to defend their practices of blasphemy laws and apostasy laws in their own countries. It is said here is a Western democracy passing a new blasphemy law in the 21st century, and so what is wrong with our blasphemy laws? So I'll just summarise by saying that you have rights, your beliefs don't have rights. We shouldn't be able to cause harm to actual people, but we should be able to ridicule their beliefs if we choose to do so. And blasphemy laws are silly, misguided and dangerous, and we shouldn't give in to terrorism, and on that basis I urge you to oppose the motion. Thank you very much.
Silly cunt, cock, dick, shit, fuck, motherfucker! Boobies. Like, there's some things we don't want to hear. Like bad jokes and attempts at opening a debate amongst them. And what I want to talk to you about today is about, I want to put this in context of how this feels, how blasphemous statements or seditious publications or whatever you want to call it, in the manner of Charlie Hebdo, feel to a member of an alienated community, of a religion that's isolated from the majority of that community, or that's distinct, for example, Islam in Ireland. So the first thing to say from the get-go is I don't necessarily defend blasphemy laws as they exist today. Like, there is an allusion to a problem with Irish blasphemy laws when somebody over here offers a point of information to the first speaker, James, and he says, can you explain what indecent means? And inevitably what he's getting at is this, the word indecent in Irish blasphemy laws is essentially a subjective thing that's open to multiple interpretations, and maybe affords too much power to the judiciary to decide what you can and cannot say. What we'd say to that is we probably shouldn't put in like broad words like indecent, but we should put in, like, I think we can have principally a blasphemy law that's very specific and protects people in the sense that you could frame it in terms of something that attacks the identity of another person in a way that is demeaning to their own dignity. I think might be a fair criteria to apply. Okay, so that's what I'm standing over. First of all, I'd like to just, Michael had an allusion, the speaker just before me, had an allusion to the Irish constitutional context. And the Irish constitutional context is pretty crazy. It's like the preamble says, in the name of the most holy Trinity and God Almighty, this nation must do X, Y, and Z that's holy in charity and mercy and all that kind of stuff. And what Michael seems to be implying there is that when a law exists in that constitutional context, that it's more likely to be applied in some ultra-Catholic or ultra-Christian way. Functionally, the preamble to the Irish Constitution has only ever been used in a sense of judicial rhetoric in terms of just really driving the point home. They've already decided on other bases, and I just like to highlight God of the Almighty. Like even in the 1950s, they didn't invoke that stuff. So that's not relevant. Okay, the next thing is, Michael talks about shit things Muslims do, or some Muslims do. And some of those shit things are pretty shit. Like shitty misogyny is pretty shit. And but what Michael seems to be saying to you is that the only way you can address like certain distortions of Sharia law, the only way you could stop that happening is to have like a cartoon of some caricature of a Muslim person with a beard. Inevitably they always have beards in these cartoons, and some kind of caricature of a silly man who's an arrow pointed at him saying Muhammad, whispering in his ear, hate your wife and you get 70 virgins or something like that. Like, no, you're not going to change anything about the way like things happen within the family of an Islamic household by depicting them in ridiculous cartoons and showing them how ridiculous these things are. Because those things are ridiculous from your perspective, but not theirs. They're going to feel alienated, they're going to feel annoyed, they're going to feel less open to your ideas. You don't further the goal of critique of stupid religious practices through like blasphemous material. Even internally within Islam, there are people who critique these applications of Sharia law and say, no, that's not really what the Prophet says the word of Allah really is, and we should do things in a nicer way. And you probably undermine their ability to suggest to fellow members of the Islamic faith when they're identified with these ridiculous cartoons. Okay, the third thing is, like, then Michael tells you that we give them what the terrorists want. What? The terrorists, like, what the terrorists want us to apply blasphemy laws. No, I don't think that's what they did when they shot up Charlie Hebdo. Like, they have like, terrorism and terrorist act attacking civilian non-combatant populations has a tactical goal. And that tactical goal is not to, like, show you that they hate your freedom or to like, just kill people for the sake of it. What they want in return is a disproportionate response in order to increase the support they have. They want you to publish cartoons ridiculing all of Islam, because then that helps them build up their support base, because it fosters an idea of siege mentality. So, in a sense, like, that's really not a reason not to have blasphemy laws, is giving in to the terrorists, and it's empty rhetoric on Michael's part. Okay, but what I want to talk to you about is how it feels to be a member of a minority religion. So I think, like, probably the easiest example to work with is Islam in Ireland. So it's like, what it is you feel from the very get-go, in the smallest of ways, you feel different from everybody else. You feel different when you close the door in your car and your headscarf gets caught in it, and nobody else is wearing headscarves, but you are. You feel different on that very basic level. You feel different on that very basic level of if you adhere to the faith very strictly, praying 5 times a day, sometimes necessarily in public. And these things accumulate in very subtle different ways that make you feel different from the general populace. That's not a nice feeling. That's not a nice feeling from the very start. But that happens regardless of whether there are blasphemy laws or not, okay? But then, moreover, like, there's a specific cultural context of the majority religion. So, like, in Ireland, that would be the Angelus on TV, which I'm sure Michael also opposes, but the fact of the matter, the Angelus is still on TV. Like, that alone makes you feel different. And that's also pretty crap, okay? And what happens then is, even worse than that, how you feel those people perceive you is also really shit. Because invariably, whenever a bomb goes off anywhere, the first question the talking heads and the pundits on CNN are asking is, are they Islamists? Are they Muslim? Anytime the Islamic faith is mentioned in the mainstream media, it's in relation to inevitably terrorism, or perhaps maybe OPEC lowering oil prices. But like nobody really listens to that stuff anyway. So like that's the way it is. And what do you feel when you see the front page of the Irish Times and you see this certain caricature of you and what your religion means to the public? You feel pretty alienated, and that gets worse. That gets much worse when people say, and they stand up in magazines like Charlie Hebdo and draw ridiculous cartoons of you lampooning your identity, some of the things you hold very dear to yourself. You feel really awful, and you're not going to listen to the ideas they're trying to explain your faith is ridiculous. You're going to feel awful. You're going to feel annoyed. If you're a young Muslim boy, like 15 years old, you're more likely, who's having an identity crisis, you're more likely to go on to these forums. You're more likely to become radicalised. That's really harmful. And at any rate, we shouldn't make people feel like that if it furthers no goal. So that's why we have blasphemy laws. I'm not saying we necessarily have to have Irish blasphemy laws as they exist, but we need to protect minority communities. We need to protect them from people who think they mean well, but at the end of the day, they're just trying to make money selling silly cartoons. Thank you. I urge you to support Irish blasphemy laws. Thank you.
Mr. Auditor, ladies and gentlemen of the Law Society, ladies and gentlemen, I'll start off by saying I've noticed two things since I've come in. First of all, I haven't spoken in this theatre before. It's a bit of a novelty compared to theatre M or L on a good day. Secondly, when I rock up with a notepad and the first speaker of the proposition rocks up with an iPad, I think I probably should have given up debating by this stage. But I'm going to open this on three main points, obviously. Freedom of speech and expression, the nature of belief and how that interacts with emotion, and finally, no right to not be offended. That will be the fundamental tenet of my speech. The nature of freedom of speech and expression, and why I should have the right to offend and to be seditious and to be everything that everything wants to be. And in fact, I'm just going to start off by being blasphemous in this debate. I have a fundamental problem in an institution enshrined and dedicated to learning how people can take a view of life, the world, and all the things in it that is based completely immaterially, not on fact. That is worrying. No, thank you. You're out of time. There we go. In a minute. It is genuinely terrifying that people can go, oh, well, when I'm writing my academic essay, I have to, fill out that bibliography, I've got a footnote, all that crap, I've got to refer to 4 or 5 sources. But, the reason the world was created? Totally in a book that needs no proof to go on that. Go on, take notes.
The 2009 Act that these laws come from would say that isn't in any way blasphemous. Because it isn't by you purposefully trying to annoy...
Okay, anyone who believes in God is a fucking moron. If they... I will up the ante if you want me to use the correct language. If you feel it's offensive, genuinely, I am terrified by people who refuse the analysis of their own experience. Only want to plug in, to play, just to have that comfort blanket of, is there a reason I'm here? Is there a meaning to life? What happens when I die? They're big questions I don't have the answer to. I don't necessarily have the right to prevent other people dismissing my made-up answers. That is where blasphemy comes in, and that is where freedom of speech, and that is where the ability to draw a cartoon. Now, we're brought up in the Christian faith, where we've had images of Jesus shoved down our throats from the moment we opened our eyes. So it is truly alien for the idea that our God can be offended by a depiction, artistic, positive or negative, via art, because we've literally grown up with it. It's everywhere. It's in Renaissance art. About 70% of it is Christian-based or Christian-sponsored. So it is really alien for us in that regard. And I can't approach this from the experience of a culture that doesn't have religious-based art. And I'll take you in a second. However, that does not mean we do not have not strayed into that issue. And I suppose some of you would be far too young to remember Monty Python in their heyday and the release of The Life of Brian, and how that was viewed in some countries, I think banned in Norway for blasphemous content. This is a live issue. That was, yes, you'll say our laws protect it under artistic if someone, that individual, finds it an artistic merit or a development thereof, that there is more to it than just being grossly offensive. However, something can just be grossly offensive. Fart jokes are grossly offensive. Some people might find them funny, other people might find them grossly offensive. Is that to be covered somewhere where you're not allowed to be offended by something that someone else finds funny? Go.
But when you say that somebody when you want to criticise a religion, you must necessarily target a certain group. You must necessarily target a certain mode of that religion. For small groups within society that are alienated anyway because they have a different religion, that is a really nasty, shitty thing to do.
Well, no, it isn't. I'm sorry, simply, you're defending the minority by you're defending religion by saying all religions can have a minority basis, therefore they need defending. Of course, the group needs the ability to be able to go from their home to their mosque, or their home to their synagogue, or their home to their church in other parts of the world. That is not the issue that is at hand here. It is the ability for the society as a whole and individuals within that society to critique the belief, whether held by the mass or the minority. That's what. No, it's a squirrel to suggest that because a religion is a minority in Ireland, therefore we cannot attack the religion or its belief system. That is poppycock. Thirdly, and we'll move on to the final point, is the right not to be offended. And this is the big one as far as I'm concerned. At no point can I or anyone else exist in a vacuum of not being offended. It offends me that people believe in God. It offends others that I don't believe in God. There are people out there who pray for the non-believer and the salvation of their soul. I don't care about my soul because I don't have a soul. Ergo, those words are blasphemous. Just because the legislation has tried to word it in as broad a context as possible, it's basically impossible unless someone stands up in the middle of court and says, like I just did, I intend to offend, that they'll get away with it. That's not good enough. That's not good enough in anything approaching a democracy that where you have rational thought. And I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back down to something that is analogous in this regard. If any of you are sports fans, the centre of your brain, that little part of your brain that makes you a United fan, a Liverpool fan, a Munster fan, a Leinster fan, is the irrational centre of the brain. That's the bit that lights up when you're talking about it. That's the bit that feels good when you're at a game. It's also the bit that feels good when religious believers believe in God and are talking of God and of their faith. It is the irrational centre of the brain. It is literally a contraction of the word fanatic, fanatical fan, to spell it out. At no point can I stand up and say, as a proud Liverpool fan, and I know a thing or two about faith being a Liverpool fan, that it is offensive for someone, for me to hear the words, Liverpool are not the greatest football team in the world ever and a day, or right now, or last week, or indeed last season. Stevie, why did you slip? It is not healthy for any democracy to be curtailed in what it can approach. Take politics, for example. I actually meant to get into this under unprotected time. There are political beliefs that people hold very dear, like such as equality, the ability and the right of every individual who reaches the age of majority to inform that democracy, regardless of their gender, age, etc., etc. That is offensive to some religions. How do you square that circle? Which side do you fall down on? You fall down on the side of the society that it's informed. The religion has to take that one on the chin. It cannot reserve the right there. That's a pretty fundamental tenet in certain religions, and I include Christianity and certain expressions of it, that literally wants to put women in a box from which they're not allowed to release themselves from. On these issues, I beg to oppose.
So, being the final speaker and at that point highlighting the law that this thing is based on is a little worrying. But the 2009 law is not a squirrel. It's not us sitting on the proposition here and saying, you know, blasphemy can actually be pretty good if you restrict it in these particular ways, and therefore we're going to debate that motion. It's us going, blasphemy is being used in these ways, in this law, and that's what we're defending in light of the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And the laws say that when someone purposefully, with the intent to do it, issues a statement or publishes an article or a cartoon intended to be a grossly abusive or insulting to matters held sacred, thereby causing outrage among a substantial amount of believers of that particular religion, we should be able to fine them when that outrage is intended and when a reasonable person would not be able to find any genuine value, be it artistic, be it political, so on and so forth. So for example, to say, all the things that we've heard about the bad bits of religion. For someone to reasonably say, well, actually, you know, when you're denying facts and so forth, a reasonable person, no thank you, a reasonable person, yeah, it can be definitely argued in a court if you were brought there for a fine, that a reasonable person would think, actually, particularly in the areas of education and so on and so forth, and intercultural dialogue, that would be reasonable. What is not reasonable is to simply publish a picture of Muhammad because it's funny. It's not okay, because, no thank you, the country that we're talking about in particular in France is a country where free speech and freedom of expression has become tinged with Islamophobia and disrespect of religion. And that is a thing that's happening in a lot of Western countries. This is a country where freedom of expression does not allow a person to wear a hijab if they are going into a publicly owned building, which is key and central to their entire life, partially their culture as well, their family life, everything that they've ever known. But it is okay with us publishing cartoons that we know are going to really upset them because that's how we make money and we think it's kind of funny. And that's not okay. We're told already, no thank you, that it's okay to limit this freedom of speech because belief is silly and we need to ridicule it to make people give it up. But what is forbidden in this law, as Fionnan has went on and on about, is not what's going to make people give it up. Hurting the things that they hold dearest in a manner that the only thing you're intending to do in this law is cause this horrible feeling of guilt and be grossly abusive, insulting. That's not how you do it. Debates like this, unfortunately a debate with 6 white men is probably not the way we're supposed to do it. But that's how you do this. That's how you do it. You publish articles. You publish articles talking about the fact that probably the church shouldn't be allowed to talk about families when they've treated the Irish family the way they have over the years. Go.
You say that no reasonable person would be offended by whatever. People were offended by that cartoon. Under the written definition, an Islamic group could bring and carry a case because they were offended by a cartoon. And if you've read the cartoon, if you've seen the cartoon that they're talking about, 2 men kissing, saying love conquers hate. That is the cartoon you're talking about. That
actually gets me onto this idea. Religion is silly. Religion is the same as following a football team. This belief in religion is irrational, and it's actually as easy to choose as to choose to follow a specific football team. You're absolutely disregarding not only the cultural existence that these people are in, because I'm not a believer either. I agree with you guys on the fact that, you know, to me belief is silly. But I wasn't raised in it. It was never the core of my being. I never found it after years of addiction and found that, you know, maybe this thing works for me. So, you know, maybe the placebo effect, if you want to call it that, works for me. But it's the core of my being. It's the thing that matters the most to me. But it's silly, and it's stupid, and we can attack it. And if you get insulted by that to your very core, and actually are unable to exist in a society that's treating you in this way, well, so be it. You can't take us to court, because it's just silly. It's the same as me saying Manchester United is crap. That's not the way these laws work. That's not the way it works. In a country where freedom of expression is so limited that you can't wear a hijab, but you can completely insult their religion, there is a serious issue going on there. And that's why I would support these laws in line with the same way that I would support hate speech laws. Because those are also a good thing. So in light of the Charlie Hebdo attacks, we're told we're giving in to the terrorists. We're saying it's actually okay for them to go in and shoot. No, we're not. We're absolutely not. We're saying that's absolutely ridiculous. That's completely wrong to ever commit a murder or a violent act in this way. What we're saying in light of the Charlie Hebdo attacks is in light of the spread of Islamophobia that has flown across not just France, but all of Europe and the Western world, wherein we're being told that Islam, the only thing Islam is forcing women to wear burqas, despite the fact that you have Islamic feminist groups who talk about the fact that the belief in their own religion, the fact they like to wear burqas, is really insulting when feminists in the West start telling them that they have to start taking them off to liberate themselves. We're told that it's a thing where you can get stoned to death, despite the fact that you have Islamists who are standing up against this. We're told that it's a thing wherein it tries to oppress all of these people. We're told about all these people who are oppressed in these Islamic countries, no thank you, who actually believe in Islam, but are trying to stand up for their religious beliefs being interpreted in a different way. These people are trying to forward this thing, that we, as much as we would like to insult them and be abusive towards them, we're not going to necessarily be able to get rid of their religious belief. But maybe we should be able to build a system where they can practice it, change it, make it grow, be happier, be more progressive, and be a lot less like the Catholic Church we had a certain amount of time ago, and a little more like the one we have under Francis. Obviously, it could be better. But, you know, that idea. So when do we limit this freedom of speech? You know, there's private and there's public enforcement. In France, you have private enforcement against freedom of speech as far as Holocaust denying goes. You're not allowed to deny the Holocaust. There's fines. I'm not sure, they may be imprisoned as well. Similar to this. You have public enforcement with regard to Julien Blanc. Hashtag takedown Julien Blanc. Refusing visas to a load of countries because a load of people don't like what he's saying. His events are shut down. His YouTube and his Twitter is restricted. He isn't able to keep living. So what is acceptable as far as caricatures go? Crazy Negroes who look like monkeys. Because it's funny. Because we think we can make fun of that thing. That's not acceptable when we limit that. Because that inspires hatred. That inspires looking at someone in a silly manner. Rape and paedophile jokes or comments without any artistic license, without any ability to just try and have a little laugh at this situation, but then deal with the fact that it's a serious issue. So why do we oppose this? Because of all the stuff that Fionnan has talked about, the oppression of these people, because like people in the West who are Islamic are definitely oppressed, and they are definitely getting divided from society. They are definitely suffering racism, and they are actually moving further away from the world that these guys want to create. You're actually out of time, I'm sorry. So what we would say is we're actually cool with the blasphemy laws, but we're going to go further. We're going to do what the Constitutional Convention wanted us to do. We're going to put in hate crime laws, so that the religions that we've heard who are being abusive in this way, they probably don't get to publish those materials anymore either. Because these laws are actually a good basis for hate crime laws. We're going to restrict the publishing of things that are made to offend something that someone doesn't really have a choice over. Because I don't believe that you can prove people have a choice over religion. And that's why we support the blasphemy laws. Thank you.
Okay, well, 5 people have talked already. Thankfully, I thought I would have nothing else to say, but I have a few points. The first thing that struck me, I'd say, is that a lot of people talked about religious belief, religion. For me, all this has nothing to do with religious belief. I don't know why it took such a prominent place on the debate. I don't see the relationship, to be honest. But anyway, so I'm on the opposing side, basically because those laws, blasphemy laws, are about, they attack freedom of speech. They're used to control certain people, usually. So if we go back to the Charlie Hebdo thing, there's a big distinction to be made in all those discussions between freedom of speech, which is the ability to say whatever you like, and the content of what you say, right? So you could oppose one, you could oppose content, but support freedom of speech. That's a very important distinction. I think a lot of people get lost in that. So, oh, those cartoons are really racist, or you show the black guy. I really hate that, or if it's offensive for a religious minority, that's fine. It's kind of irrelevant to freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is just to be allowed to say that. So, for example, Charlie Hebdo, I support their right to publish what they want to publish. If you ask me about the content of what they publish, their actual cartoons, I don't agree with many of them. I think it's just stupid. I think it's just playing into the card of Islamophobia, which was very dumb to do at a time of the so-called war on terror. It just reinforces demonization of Muslims. But that doesn't mean I oppose their right to publish them. I support their right to do it. I support the Holocaust denier the right to say he denies the Holocaust. Does that mean I believe him? Oh, I don't believe him, right? It's just because he has a right to say whatever he likes, right? So that's just freedom of speech. That's the one thing that I think is very important, not the actual content.
Sir,
no. Yeah.
The potential effects of allowing freedom of speech to deny the Holocaust, to spread Islamophobia, as you're saying, to spread racism, to spread views that some people actually hold, and spread them in national newspapers. Do you think that's more important than the minor restriction on freedom of speech?
Exactly. You can make a case like that it leads to certain bad things, but if you restrict freedom of speech, the consequences, in my view, are much more negative. For example, if you were to restrict hate speech and all that, first thing you would do, if you're logical, is shut down the whole press. The whole media would have to be shut down because it is very racist. It denigrates people in certain religions, denigrates people who fight against water charges, for example, says there are just a bunch of crazy people, demonizes a lot of things. So you'd have to shut down the whole media, basically, or a lot of it, right? I'll just keep going, and after I'll a few seconds. So if you go that way, you're saying, oh, we should have a respectful debate. Oh, really? Okay, so why isn't the Kenny allowed to go say, austerity is a good thing, we need to crush the economy, we need to cut your welfare, we need to cut disability services? That's not very respectful at all. So you have to shut that down. I don't agree with him again, but I agree that he has a right to say what he thinks, right? So, you know, if you want to take it that road. And about the Holocaust, Like, come on, like in France they have laws like that, and if you notice, people talk about it all the time. In the US, that law doesn't exist. Nobody talks about it. You know, it's like, I would make a case that if you have a really stupid argument like Holocaust deniers, let the guy say it. He'll make a fool of himself, and that'll be the best argument against it, right? If you repress it, then he has a case to say, you're impeding on my freedom of speech, so you're wrong, and he'd be right, right? Yes.
East-West
Three of them, God.
East-West Germany. East Germany under the Russians, we are told, actually, you didn't do anything wrong, you can talk about the Holocaust all you want, you can say it was a good idea. West Germany, they are told that what they have done is wrong, they can't discuss it, they can't forward these beliefs. Which side of Germany has more neo-Nazis now? Your idea that Americans don't have neo-Nazis and don't have Holocaust deniers is an absolute outright lie.
No, but there is much less talk about that. That's why it's not an issue in the US. It is an issue in France. It is an issue, but less so. But anyway, if you have a really dumb idea, just let the guy say it. He'll just make a fool of himself. So that's the thing. Now, there's limits to free speech we can agree on, right? Most discussions of free speech, let's say sexual harassment in the workplace, right? Some woman says, that guy is harassing me every day. Well, I'm not even done. Then the guy can't go and say, well, freedom of speech, I can harass you sexually every day. That would be wrong, because the woman has a right also to live or work in a place without sexual harassment. So you can have those little restrictions. So you have a range of restrictions, right? Like a very restrictive regime, like those guys are advocating maybe, or a very lenient one with a few exceptions. If you walk in a theater here with a gun and I'm the boss of the guy with the gun and I say, shoot them, well, okay, I can't say, well, freedom of speech, you know. You could make an argument like that. It would be a very extreme argument. So in certain specific cases, you can restrict speech. But that doesn't include all that public debate talk. Because if you do that again, you'd shut down so much in the media, which may appear to you, I don't know, okay to say, like, you know, things like I said before, oh yeah, let's crash the economy and all that. But if you think about it, that has more repercussions on your lives than any Holocaust denier or a cartoon about any religion, right? So that's, do you have a question?
Yeah.
I have 1 minute.
You're criticizing our side of the argument because you're saying that there shouldn't be any limits on free speech, but then you're saying actually, in fact, maybe there should be some, just our limit isn't okay.
Just what?
Our limit isn't okay.
What's the last word? I'm not Irish, I can't.
It's not the blasphemy. It's not okay to live in blasphemy,
but that's what I mean.
We shouldn't place any limits on it.
Well, there's a few limits that I said in sexual harassment, let's say, but we can debate the limits. I think, in my view, that something like that is going way too far, because if you are to prevent that, you would prevent a lot of things in the media from being said. There's a few cases, and that's what you can have a discussion on. But in the terms of public debate and argument, I think it should be wide open. And again, if that person has such a crazy argument, it should be very easy to win the debate in the public place. So let just the person talk and just trash him after. If you're so strong and that strongly feeling that the argument is so crazy, it should be it should take you half a second to destroy it. So why would you want to restrict it by force and laws and all that? So there's no real point for that kind of restrictions on speech. So that's about, oh my god, I never used it until today. Okay, so I'm finished, 7 minutes. Thank you.
What I'd say is I don't necessarily stand over the laws that exist, but I think perhaps the right distinction is something that attacks the very core of your being. Is probably a fair...
Isn't sexuality more the core of your being?
No, it is, absolutely. It's a very massive part of people's identity. And if that's the case, maybe you should do that. Yeah. So I'm not saying that you should have... I'm not saying that you should have cartoons attacking people for their sexuality. I think that probably falls within the same scope of...
But it doesn't under the Irish law.
Maybe not. Maybe the Irish law... Well, I have the Irish law. So what I have... It
is only religious, it's sacred.
Yeah, it's only religious. But like, that's a start. But like, I'm not saying we can't have hate crimes. Obviously, yeah.
To be fair though, I mean, we do have the Incitement to Hatred Act that it's crap, like it needs to be replaced. Yeah. And that was what I was saying, that we need to move forward into this hate speech kind of stuff. Now with regard to the cartoon you were saying, the intention of that cartoon was to offend Muslims. because it was representing their prophet, and it was potentially, the second one that I hadn't really particularly thought of is the idea of representing him as being a gay man, which is insulting to certain branches of Islam. Which then, for example, for Islam to produce a booklet talking about how homosexuals are disgusting and should be wiped off the face of the planet, that should also be not okay.
Yeah, but the debate
But
isn't about whether
that's too
Oh yeah, but I'm saying the blasphemy laws with regards to the things protected under them.
Okay, we'll just get that one response to that.
Yeah, look, the distinction is, look, this is a law society. This issue has been fairly settled in international human rights law. There's a distinction between things that are harmful to people and things that are harmful to their beliefs. And everything from the United Nations Human Rights Committee to the Venice Commission, which advises countries on constitutional law, have weighed up that the balance between freedom of expression and freedom of religion, and have come to that conclusion that incitement to hatred against individuals is a legitimate thing for laws to do, but protecting their feelings, their religious feelings, no matter how dear to them, is not a legitimate restriction on freedom of expression. And the cartoons in Charlie Hebdo, let's remember that they're not intended to offend Muslims. They're intended to ridicule Islam, the beliefs, not the people. Charlie Hebdo regularly has cartoons satirising the French government and the police for their anti-immigrant positions. Charlie Hebdo is a very strong pro-Muslim, pro-immigrant publication. It has a cartoon that was supposedly decried by people who know nothing about the publication for being racist, for picturing a French politician as a monkey. But what that cartoon is it was responding to the National Front comparing that woman to a monkey, and it was associating that image with their logo and their party slogan. So if you look at what Charlie Hebdo is doing, it is making the distinction that international human rights law also makes, which is it is legitimate to attack beliefs, no matter how dearly they're held by people, in the same way as it's legitimate for the Quran to publish things that I find offensive. That's not my offence at what's in the Quran or the Bible isn't sufficient for them to be legally banned, but it is not attacking the individuals or causing harm to the individuals.
I might just spin back over to you, Prof, before there's another...
Okay, yeah. I don't think we're saying that whatever you subjectively feel and decide, whatever way you decide to take on that day, makes you feel a little bit offended is something that should be banned. Notice as well, by the way, and this is just a misunderstanding in the debate, blasphemy laws do not exist as a right of private action for any litigious party. Like if Michael says, or if somebody says people of faith are morons, and then a person of faith can't say, hang on, I'm offended, I'm going to go to court and sue you. It doesn't work like that. It's at the discretion of a public prosecutor. So that's the first part. So like that's a removal of the subjective part of this, first of all. And what we're saying is that's not the case. But there are certain things we can really demarcate really clearly as being part of somebody's very core of their being, in terms of, like, I think it's fair to say, like, lampooning a person for an attachment to a higher power and the good that does in their life is probably an attack on their very being, whereas attacking and criticising components of that religion's assertion about sexuality and modes of expressing your sexuality is probably different. And we don't think, like...
One thing that's very significant there. The first test in our law is that, which is a subjective test, is that people have to show outrage. It's thereby causing outrage among a substantial number of peers.
Yeah.
So what our law does is it incentivises outrage when we should be incentivising people to behave more responsibly and proportionately.
The issue is, in this debate, is that to Sunni Muslims, not Shia Muslims, not all Muslims, so for example in Iran it's quite common to find graven images of Muhammad, but to Sunni Muslims a core tenet of their belief is that any depiction whatsoever of Muhammad is deeply insulting, it compromises the divinity of this character, and it also, the kind of interesting point to note that was kind of brushed over is that they're religious, they're silly, that's fine. But as we keep bringing up, the link between religion and culture is a lot more than the link between a certain politician and their views or so on and so forth. So for example, when they put forward this image of the Islamic person and they were big and they were bearded, and I've seen some of them where they have the swords and all this kind of stuff, it does further the social situation in France, which is that Muslims are incredibly disrespected and incredibly oppressed. And we then just hear that it's because they're silly, but perhaps it's linked to the fact that they're Arabs, perhaps it's linked to the fact that they're Muslims, perhaps this whole thing is a little more complex than simply saying, well, I'm not offended by that, but I would be offended by X, because there's a whole complex situation of oppression and division that has to be taken into account.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, yeah.
About this thing, what's offensive in the cartoons and all that, what's not offensive, should you be offensive or whatever. One thing to keep in mind is that the background reason why all this happens is because the US and the West have destroyed a country, right? Iraq, right? They're supporting Israel for like decades, and that pisses off people in the Middle East. Does that justify bombing Charlie Hebdo? Of course not, but it gives you the context for that. Of course, if you do that, there's going to be some resentment somewhere in the Middle East, and some people who are a bit more, radical than others, they will take up weapons and they'll commit things that are crimes, like a Charlie Hebdo. But that's really the background. So I think we should maybe move beyond like, oh, was the prophet depicted in a really offensive way or not? Whatever it is, it would have happened anyway if you keep destroying countries like that. And if you support all those very radical regimes in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is the one you cannot even mention in the US. Like that's supported by the West. Most fundamentalist regime ever. Of course it's going to seep down to the society, and you'll have events like that, and you'll have others. You can predict that if you keep doing it. So I move beyond the cartoons and,
Just on a very quick point of information, Christians and Muslims have been butchering each other for centuries before the United States even existed.
This is an apology for you.
For those of you who would support Ireland's blasphemy laws, so agreeing with the proposition, this side, please raise your hands. And all those against, I think the opposition have, so the motion is defeated.